Well, the first is to figure out what caused the burnout, right? Is it just work hours? Is it a lack of varied activities, right? Is it lack of social interactions, right? The IT world, and what I find, and this could be a cliche, but the more intense the IT job, like the more it requires a fine eye for detail, the less human interaction that job actually has, because it becomes more about what's on the screen than the people around, and that creates burnout.
Welcome to Cybersecurity Heroes, an Iron Scales podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with CISOs, security directors and architects, SOC analysts, and other InfoSec stars so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to Cybersecurity Heroes. I'm your host for today's episode, Brendan Rudd, Community Director at IronScales, an email security platform powered by AI, enhanced by thousands of customer security teams, and built around detecting and removing threats in the inbox. We offer a service that is fast to deploy, easy to operate, and is unparalleled in the ability to stop all types of email threats, including advanced attacks like business email compromise, account takeover, and more. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get into the show. Hey Gaia, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going, Brendan? Happy to be here.
Likewise, I'm really excited about today's episode. We haven't done something like this before, so before we dive in, could you just tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what you're working on these days?
Sure. So I'm a coach. I coach entrepreneurs and C-suite executives, and I help them to basically, in a nutshell, I help them to reconnect back with who they are, to really understand who they were born to be, like who they are fundamentally. And the reason why this is what I focus on is because we're at a crucial time in our human history where we get to live out of our own purpose, our own mission. We're not living out of survival anymore, right? So this is such an important time in history to really create legacies that matter. And so in order to create a legacy that matters, it means we must really be intentional with our day, be present to who we are and how we're showing up for people.
Great, thanks. So we're here today to obviously talk about your program, and I believe your program is called Titan. What does Titan stand for?
I'm not quite sure if you're seeing the N in the right direction now because the camera does this funny thing. But basically, it's total intelligence to achieve nirvana. Nirvana being the Buddhist word for bliss. We spend more time at work with our employees and our colleagues than we do with our family that we've chosen to have and marry into. And a lot of the stress that we experience comes from the workplace. So how to be a Titan? It's to really address that part of us that is unsatisfied, that is unresolved, that is still not living in bliss. And I do that through the Titan program, which we do this by addressing your total intelligence, which is addressing the 6 parts of you that make you who you are and therefore allow you to do what you want to do. And those 6 elements are mind, heart, spirit, body, behavior, and language.
So how did this adventure concept framework come about? The only thing that I can relate to is the Clifton Strength. Not sure if you're familiar with that.
Right, so there's lots of different people who endeavor similar things. So Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, right? All of these are different assessments that you can take to understand different aspects of your personality or your behavior or your actions. Total intelligence comes from, as a coach, I have over 5,000 hours of working with C-suites and entrepreneurs around the world, and I speak multiple languages. So I have the privilege of being able to coach in multiple languages. And there are some parts of humanity and human behavior, human emotion, human presence that are standard across the entire planet, no matter the wealth, the status, the religion, the culture, right? Fundamentally, all humans are the same. And so that's where the total intelligence comes from. I have been a coach for, I think, about 7 or 8 years now. And there's so much, like a lot of my friends are coaches, and there's so much time spent in coaching that is actually not moving people forward. So for instance, coaching often is results-based, and results are great. We need results as a way to measure our progress. But if that's the only thing we're gunning for, we forget the whole existence of ourselves, the whole being part of ourselves. And who we are fundamentally will define what we do and how we do it. So if we put this in a business context, if we have a new client and we've set a delivery date for next Wednesday on the project, right? So maybe internally the idea is to have the project done by Monday instead of Wednesday, so that there's 2 days buffer for whatever might happen, right? That's a result. So the result is, let's have this done by Monday so we can have 2 days to review, and we send it off to the client on Wednesday. But to get that project done by Monday requires different mindset. It requires different belief system. For one, everybody involved must believe it's possible to do it by Monday instead of by Wednesday. So it's a little bit of a simple example to show that everything we do fundamentally starts with what we believe, what we value, and who we are. And so the Total Intelligence program is about addressing all of those elements of us. It's how we think is the head, how we feel is the heart. Because, right, like our emotions are our drivers. And I think you told me you love marketing, right? So every decision we make is based on emotion, but we use an analytical mind to validate and justify the emotional decision. So if we're someone who is stuck in a negative emotional pattern, like a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, all our decisions will be made out of pain and hurt. So that caps our potential for success, for happiness, for influence, for leadership. The next one is spirit. So the spirit is, is our switch turned on to surviving or thriving, fear or trust, surrender or control? So this, as you can imagine, also makes a big difference in how we show up with people, how we do things. If we're set to thrive and surrender and trust, we will take bigger risks, bigger chances, bigger projects, bigger clients. And therefore, maybe we don't make 100% of the shots, but we make bigger wins when the shot works out. Then we have the body, and the body is all about energy. We don't, as a modern society, we don't take care of our bodies so good anymore. We spend too much time on devices. We're on our phone until the moment we close our eyes to go to sleep. We wake up and the first thing we do is we check our text messages, right? Like this disrupts everything on the physiological level. And then we complain that we don't have enough energy to spend time with our kids on the weekends or to do that project that has meant something to our heart forever. So our bodies are all about our energy and how we protect that energy, nurture it, and drive it to excellence. And then with those being the 4 fundamentals, we get to move into the application, which is the behavior. How do we now keep routines and habits that consistently create the person we want to be, the leader we want to be? And how do we communicate this? Because ultimately we're all building a legacy based on a vision we have for ourselves. And anybody in our entourage who helps us, like our employees, our family, our friends, they're basically making our vision or our legacy a part of their own. So our words, our empathy, the way we listen, it matters to how we show up as leaders, as colleagues. And with these 6 fully operational from a place of integrated wellness, right? In a company, it means that the environment is a better environment to work with. People spend their 8 hours of work happier, more productive, more efficient, feeling valued, so they can go home to their families feeling better and healthier and more energized and create a better world in the long run.
When you first started your career, I think you mentioned coming from IT. If I understood correctly, this is really where you kind of came up with the need for creating such a program or, changing things in the workplace. So can you explain how this came about and the observations that you made during your time in IT and specifically what you thought was wrong with the culture there?
Absolutely. So I studied psychology as an undergrad, and then I moved into, so it was just pre-Y2K when the world was going to end because everybody forgot to put zeros in their code or something. So I took advantage and I went back to school after my undergrad, and I studied programming, database administration, and I became certified in all these different things. Like I was like Oracle certified and Microsoft certified, and it sounded very impressive on paper. So I worked in IT, and I worked in IT in RFID technology back when nobody really knew what RFID was, and barcodes. And again, not the most exciting thing you've ever heard of from in the IT industry, but it was essential, and it was essential to very specific industries as well back then. So it was an up-and-coming technology. And that came with a lot of pressure in the company because not a lot of companies were doing what we were doing. So the last company that I worked, for instance, was the number one software producer in this field at the time. And so as you can imagine, we had very high targets to reach. Now, what I noticed a lot in the IT world was that it basically being a sedentary job, right? You're at your desk, you're coding, or you're looking for errors, or you're at the computer all day long. And my colleagues across all the companies that I worked in IT were all, let's call it, on the less than healthy example. Drinking Jolt Cola and espressos, they were going out of style. And you could see it in the skin that was all breaking out. You can see it in their weight. You can see it in body shape as well. It's not even just the weight, but when you sit for long periods of time, it takes a toll on the bottom half of your body. So you do get shaped differently. So there's a lot of visual examples to show that it wasn't the healthiest job somebody could have, right? 12 hours in front of a computer, not good for your skin, not good for your eyes. If you're then in one of these server rooms that are really cold, and there's other problems that go there. So that was one problem. The physiological issues that I saw were apparent. But then I moved up the corporate ladder quite quickly. So by the time I was 32, I was an executive. And I basically burnt out. It took me about 3 years to burn out. But I burnt out from working, so again, you're at the computer, you don't have to go anywhere, but you're working on all time zones. So I had colleagues that I managed in Singapore and Japan and Germany and Canada and France. So I was online all the time, and I burnt out, basically exhausted from being on all the time. And I did have a few business trips and things. It took its toll on my life. And that's when I quit what I call my profit-based career, and I moved into a passion-based career. So everybody thought I was crazy, but I quit that. I used all the knowledge that I had, and I built a little mini online empire in the food industry. And then I created a catering company, a cooking school, and I had my own TV show as well. So all of that knowledge was still valuable, but I applied it in little spurts. So I would do 2 hours of website programming, and then I'd go make a cake on my feet for 4 hours. So it was completely different. I got to use my skills, but also be more interactive with people, be more physically active as well. And what was really great, one of the things I didn't mention about the IT world was that because it was such a high intensity industry, right? What's the next product release? Who's our next client? It was so driven from the outside, from the results perspective. I got to learn a lot about human behavior and how executives make decisions. So I reported to the CEO, and the CEO had a very unique way of deciding who got budget. and where he was going to put his resources. So I got to observe all of this and play the game, which was super useful because, as you can imagine, if you're then an entrepreneur, like negotiation skills, selling skills, decision-making skills, empathizing with other people's emotions and where they're at so you can understand them and move them to action, to move them into your vision, it becomes like the most important thing to your success as an entrepreneur or as a business leader. So that's what I got from the IT industry, both the good and the stuff that needed improving on, which is what I'm doing now.
I would love to go into how Titan can be applied in the business world and help companies and employees get more, out of their careers and enjoy their work and be the better selves that you talk about. Can you walk us through who should sign up for Titan and why?
Absolutely. So the Titan program is really anybody can take it, but it's particularly designed for anyone in a position of influence. So managers, executives, entrepreneurs, right? Anybody who works from a position of having to move and influence others. And the reason why it's designed that way is because think about your own life, right? You've had a lifetime of experiences. Some were good, some were bad. Some you relive and you're excited about, and you want to tell the world about them because they were really fun moments. And some you wish they were different, right? Or some you'd like to go back and change how they were, or some you wish it had never happened at all. We all have these things, and these happen on the unconscious level. So you asked about going into companies and how does this help? We operate as human beings in a zombie level. And what that zombie level looks like is repeating things every single day the same way without giving it much intentional thought. This creates legacies by default, right? It's the 70-year-old who looks back and said, I never took the chance or the time to do this. We do have the time, we can take the chance, but when we're acting like a zombie, just repeating yesterday's habits, yesterday's thoughts, yesterday's emotions, yesterday's decisions, we create these legacies by default. And my invitation is to create them by design. So a company, a good company, will always have a brand and a culture within, like a family, the things that they stand for. Now, what a company stands for is not just pretty words on a wall or on a mission statement. It has to be embodied by the employees and put across in every single engagement, whether it's with each other or with a client or in an email. It has to show. That's what branding is. That's what culture is. And often we have employees in our team that don't play the game. They don't fit into the culture. And the Titan program, or Igniting the Total Intelligence, is really about helping every member in the company understand what is personally holding them back. So basically, first is what are their values? What do they believe is meant for them and can be theirs? And then what are the habits, the emotions, the trust that's propelling them forward or getting in the way? And the Titan program is designed in a way that it makes you clear of all of this using those 6 modules, right? The head, the heart, the spirit, the body, the behavior, and the language. The one we didn't talk about is the genius, which is the first one. And the genius is understanding. It's the first one because it's the conscious mind versus the unconscious mind. So the things you do versus the things you don't even realize you're doing. It's the conditioned thinking or the conditioned version of you versus that you that's desperately trying to show up but is being pushed down all the time because you might think you can't. We start there, we clear that up, and then we move into the other ones. And what I found is that people who take on this challenge, they open up. So it doesn't matter how much success they've already had, it blows up, like it gets bigger. I have a client, he had like the most amazing logical mind you could ever have a conversation with. This man could like talk through anything. He was so clear in his thought. It was incredible. And we opened him up from the heart space. So we cleared away tons of pain that was trapped in there from his childhood, which we all have. We amplified the trust level, so the spirit level. We got him reconnected with his body. So he's eating better, he's exercising better, he's sleeping better, which is so important. And by default, his behavior and his language got better. And this man, I worked with him 2 years ago, and we are now friends. Like, we're in each other's network of friends. And he calls me up every so often, and he still tells me, like, I cannot believe how amazing I feel. Like, if you had told me 2 years ago that I could be this happy, I would have thought it was hogwash. But now that I'm on this side, there's no limits. There's no limits. Everybody, I can move everybody and anybody to action. I can help anybody and everybody. I feel connected to everyone around me. And he's still achieving amazing things with his businesses. But even his businesses they're meaningful for humanity. It's not just a way to get a really good paycheck.
You spoke about the burnout in IT, and in cyber it's the same. I would love to hear from you how this program can help.
Well, the first is to figure out what caused the burnout, right? Is it just work hours? Is it a lack of varied activities, right? Is it lack of social interactions, right? The IT world, and what I find, and this could be a cliche, but the more intense the IT job, like the more it requires a fine eye for detail, the less human interaction that job actually has, because it becomes more about what's on the screen than the people around. And that creates burnout, but it creates burnout of a special kind, because it's almost like spiritual burnout, like energetic burnout. And this is not to sound woo-woo. It's really about it's burnout of who we are, like who we know ourselves to be. It's like an erosion of self, and that's a very difficult burnout to experience, because it creates what I call an existential crisis. It creates these questions about, what am I here for? What do I do? What am I supposed to do? What value do I have? Is this all there is? And these questions they're great questions to have, but they're painful questions to have if there's no one there to support you or to talk you through them and find the answer, right? The cliche is men go through this and they dump their wives, they get a 20-year-old girlfriend and a convertible red sports car or something. And it's a funny cliche, but the reality is that a lot of people do their own version of that, and they never address the existential part, that essence of them part. So they keep the same job and they change external elements, and so they keep feeling crappy on the inside. And the Titan program, especially for people like in IT or cybersecurity, where that human interaction is different, right? It's not social, it's technical. It's a technical human interaction for the most part. And then in that technical, it means that there's always data being exchanged. And in that data being exchanged, there's always a validation of self that is attached to the data. It shouldn't be that way, but that is the impression. And so there's always this innate competition. Who's right? Are you right or am I right? Are you going to solve this malware problem or am I? Are you going to find the bug or am I? Like there's this inherent almost competition against your fellow employee, your fellow colleague. And when there's competition, there's not cooperation. And when there's not cooperation, we're always on edge. It's just the way it is. There's no other way. Our human spirit is always compensating for the protection of self. So if we're in an environment where every word we say is either proving us to be right or proving us to be wrong, inevitably, internally, it's going to create some kind of energetic or spiritual havoc. And that's what the burnout typically looks like, the more technical the job is.
So would you say that since the pandemic started, has your program adjusted in any way to that change that happened in the last year?
Well, it's really funny, right? Because I think what's happened with the pandemic has been fascinating to watch as a social experiment. Suddenly, all these people who were complaining about having to go to work don't have to go to work anymore. And then they have to work from home. And then they have to develop new habits. And then without the container of getting in the car and going to work, there is no container that is work life or home life. and everything becomes mush. It kind of melts into each other. And that's for the lucky ones who had a space at home that they can actually work from, because those people who like lived in a studio apartment or that had not even a container of space for work and home, that they had it even worse. Like the burnout, the mental wellness was even tougher. And we have tools, right? We have Zoom and WhatsApp and whatever to communicate more. But it's almost, I find what I've seen is almost like there's almost a backlash against communicating more, because the only way to communicate is through more technology being how we work. There's this association that's happening, or that happens. If every time you sit down at a computer, you're in work mode, the last thing you want to do is sit at the computer to talk to your mom, right? Because internally it's the same stress. So how the Titan program helps address this is, again, it's through helping the client become super aware of themselves, super intentional with their time and present. We all have anchors. So an anchor, for anybody who has never done coaching before, is like an association, right? If, for instance, so a really popular one is like social smokers tend to only smoke when they drink, because the smell, the taste of alcohol has an association to cigarettes. So if you do one, you're going to do the other. So if you want to stop smoking as a social smoker, you actually have to stop drinking as well. You have to stop the association, or you have to change the association. So connect alcohol to, I don't know, a carrot stick, right? So those are called anchors. This behavior anchors another one. And that's one of the ways that the Titan program helps is, and this is further on in the behavior part, is what is the anchor between your computer and your emotional state, for instance, right? Between a certain room in your house and your emotional state. So that when you're sitting at the computer to talk to your best friend on Zoom, it doesn't hold the same stress and worry and fear and anger and whatever else might be there that you might have sitting at your computer with work. And then if you're at work, how do you go through the work with methods to release the buildup of the stress from the day? So, and that's looking at things like anchors, belief systems. So what do you believe is possible? What do you believe must happen? What do you believe can't happen? So that's all part of the Titan program in the different elements.
CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IronScales, an AI-powered, self-learning email security platform that helps security professionals proactively prevent, detect, and remediate phishing attacks in a matter of seconds, not hours or days. And we have an exclusive offer for our podcast listeners. Discover dormant phishing threats in your organization's mailboxes. Get a free 90-day scan back with a detailed report. Integrate in seconds with 2 clicks via API to Microsoft Office 365 and see what your current email security is missing. Go to ironscales.com/free scan to learn more.
So now that you've set the stage, I would love to go a little deeper into how the program works and functions.
So the Titan program is 3 phases. The first phase is the Awakening Your Genius phase. And that's a phase that is about the unconscious patterns, the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind, again, just quickly, is who you truly are when all the things you've learned to be are stripped away. So if you consider that all the I am statements that you've ever made in life, right? I am a woman. I am a brunette. I am Canadian. And I'm also Portuguese. My family is Portuguese. So these I am statements, they're labels. And those labels have learned behavior. So as a woman, for instance, there may be some things that culturally I learned that I'm not allowed to do because I'm not a man, for instance. So the unconscious mind doesn't care if I'm a woman or a man. If it wants to jump out of a plane or be a fighter jet pilot or whatever, it's going to say, this is what you want to do. Just do it. The conditioned part of me, the conscious mind, says, I know you want to be a fighter jet pilot. The Air Force doesn't allow women in. I mean, they do now, but I'm just using this as a silly example. But so that's the difference between the conscious and the unconscious. It's the learned version of you, which is where a lot of our pain comes from. It's trying to meet the expectations of the world and others. It's the shoulds and the needs to do, right? Versus the unconscious mind, which is the part that's always there for us. It's the part that was never conditioned by the world. It's the one that says, I really want to do this. This is where I'm gravitating towards. This is what really draws my attention and my affection and my love and my everything. I know I should be doing X, but I really want to do Y. So that's the unconscious versus the conscious mind. And that's the first part, because we need to clear away the conditioning as much as we can, or at the very least bring awareness to it so that you can be intentional with your actions and how you show up. Then we go into phase 2, which is the Total Intelligence Program. And the Total Intelligence Program is where we look at mind, heart, spirit, body, behavior, and language. So we start by the mind, which is the logical, our logical way of thinking, our IQ, what we know. And I consider the IQ, or the head, actually the lowest form of intelligence, because it's only based on what we've learned in life. So it's only based on books or experiences or what we've heard on the TV. And that's it. That's the only capsule of it. So it doesn't take anything else into account. Logic is numbers and data and analysis. If it's not there, it might as well not exist. So that's logic. That's the mind. So we look at logically, how do you think? Logically, how do you make decisions? Logically, what's getting in the way of making better decisions? Or what is the pattern that's happening in your decisions? So that, again, the goal is always to improve. Coaching is always about going from less to more. So the goal is always to improve. So we want to always improve the decision-making ability, the analysis ability, the logical mind, right? Then we move into the heart, which is feelings, emotions, the EQ. And this is about looking at the emotional patterns within us. Everybody has familiarity with the 6 major negative emotions, which are anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, and shame. These 6 emotions are present in all of us. And what we want is, we can't ever get rid of the emotion, and nor do we want to, because emotion is information. But what we want to do is we want to heal them or integrate them so that they become valid information, not reactions that are unwarranted or unnecessary. Right? Because we've all seen 2 people fight where one person loses their cool, and the second that happens, the conversation has stopped. It becomes like an argument, right? That's an unwarranted, unnecessary emotion. They could have probably resolved their differences by staying cool, calm, and collected just as well. So the health and the heart part is all about addressing those emotional patterns that are not serving us, recognizing them, stopping them in their tracks, and integrating them. I don't talk about healing because there's nothing wrong. There's no problem to solve. It's about learning how to use what we've got. And then that moves us into spirit, which is the ability to trust, to surrender, to not be in control. If you think that stress is the number one killer in our society today, right? It is the creator of all lifestyle diseases, and lifestyle diseases make up 95% of diseases, right? So where does stress come from? For most of us in the business world, and the higher the stakes, the more it shows up, is in control, having to control. And almost everything we do is some form of control of another person or a system or a process. So when we can recognize where we are acting in control, we can also recognize where our power is to release the stress from it and trust more. So trust the path versus controlling the outcome. And by doing this, and if you're a salesperson, for instance, and like a really clear example, like if you're a salesperson and your goal is to have 20 sales by next month, you're gonna do whatever it takes to get those 20 sales by next month. But if your goal is to do whatever it takes to be the very best salesperson ever and to enjoy the process and try everything, right? So then you can make 40 sales by the next month, right? So sometimes our results is a form of control, And if we release the control, we can actually expand and grow a lot more. So trust is the next thing we work on, is the ability to trust the process, trust who we are, trust how we show up, surrender to what happens so there isn't that emotional imprint from not getting what we want, when we wanted it, how we wanted it. So phase 3 of the Titan program is the legacy part, right? So if you consider that phase 1 is really about that unconscious part of you that's like pushing to come out, like it's like just asking to come out. It's that part of you that creates friction. Once we've cleared away the conditioned you and brought out the true you, and then we've ignited your total intelligence so that you know how to put these all in place and show up as the best you can be, leading others, moving others to act, having these amazing relationships with everyone around you where there isn't the bullying happening anymore, there isn't that friction happening anymore, because you're in such an amazing state of self that you can see what's happening and move with. And then the last part, which is a phase 3, is the legacy part. And this is where Titans come together. So it's the mastermind. So Titans come together with other Titans who've done the work as well to collaboratively and cooperatively make the world a better place. So for instance, in the cybersecurity world, that would look like having a network of other Titans work together to make the cybersecurity industry a more collaborative, right? Like more empathic, more human driven, more understanding between its participators, right? Because every single person in the cybersecurity world, for instance, who's ever experienced or given out some bullying is a part of the problem. Being a part of phase 3, the legacy part, is choosing to be a part of the solution. So it's taking everything you've learned about yourself, everything you learned about how to be the best self, and then applying it to making your world a better world to live in for everyone.
Yeah, I really love that, because we seem to be fighting ourselves more than the cyber criminals out there. So I would even say, if there's just one thing we can learn from you today, it's let's be nicer to each other and let's fight back versus fighting ourselves.
Oh, let's love back. Let's love back. I know it sounds really woo-woo, but like that is just the way it is. We can choose to fight and we can choose to love. One of those is pleasant.
For sure.
And those are the first 3. When those 3 are aligned, the other 3 become a lot easier, which is body, the energy we just talked about. So health, sleeping, what we eat. I do genetic patterning on my clients. And so we get the genetic recipe they were made with from their mom and dad. We cross-reference it with the medical history that they have. That's basically what was told to them and given to them. And we take the epigenetics of them. So who are they now? What are the decisions that they've made? What does their life look like? What are the experiences that they've had? And we cross-reference the 3 of them, and we create a report that is unique to that one person. There's no other human being on the planet who will get the same report. And what this report allows them to know is everything they need to know about their body and how to maintain health as long as it possibly can be maintained for. So what to eat, how to exercise, what to avoid, even thought patterns, right? Even our thought patterns show up in our DNA. So this is all about increasing that energy level naturally, not with 15 cups of coffee, but like rather naturally by getting the sleep that our genetics were created, our genetics specifically need to eat the foods that our genetics say will tolerate. Those trends that we see out there with the gurus telling us, eat these things, like eat collard greens. But yes, as a general rule, collard greens are really great, but maybe they're not great for your specific genetics. We need to know. So that's what the genetics, the body part element helps us figure out, is fundamentally, what is the recipe of you and how do we make it powerful? And then behavior goes into the routines, the habits. So how do you start your morning? How do you finish your day? What do you do throughout the day to regenerate and de-stress? How do you get more energy, how do you practice being the you that you want to be? Because nobody wants to be an asshole, right? Am I allowed to say that on your podcast? Nobody wants to be seen as the jerk, right? We all want to be seen as the good guy, the one who saved the day, the hero. That requires certain behavior patterns. So we look at the behavior there then at that point. And then lastly, we look at the influence. So how do we communicate? And the beauty about this is that when we align each one of these intelligences, the next one becomes easier and easier to do. So our language is a representation of who we are and how we feel. I'm sure everybody here can relate to those people who are always like, oh my God, you're so wonderful. I love what you're wearing. But you know that they're not sincere. Do you know people like this? That's language. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say.
No, I said it can be a cultural thing. You see it in certain cultures more than others, but definitely know what you're talking about.
But those people, it's that there's a misalignment between their words and how they really feel, right? Or if you've ever talked to someone who says one thing and like they're acting all nice to you, they probably don't like you very much or something, right? That's misalignment of words to the space. And that we do that too. So when we are in an uncomfortable situation, we're going to speak a little bit differently. When we are feeling intimidated, we're going to speak a little bit differently. And this, again, if we go back to the IT world where there's so much competition, this shows up all the time. And it shows up in ways that hurt us and hurt the people around us. So the language element of the total intelligence is really about speaking authentically from where we are and what we want the world to see. Like authentically. So if we want to be seen like a good guy, we first have to be the good guy so that we can speak as the good guy in an aligned way. Because when any one of those bits are off, the person who's listening can tell. We can tell, they can tell, right? So the language is really about influencing from that space of alignment, authenticity, because we think the way we want to think, we feel the way we want to feel, we trust, we show up in energy, we show up being and doing what we need to do to be who we want to be. And so therefore the language is just the icing on the cake.
I'm not sure if you can speak to any success stories where you've been able to kind of turn companies' cultures around from being a more suppressive rank and file type of culture to a more open, communicative culture, and how that changed their business or their brand or their results.
Well, I think we might have talked about this when we were preparing for the podcast, but when a company isn't working at the human level, the person who's responsible for that is the one at the head of the hierarchy. So you talked about rank, right? The one who's in the position of leadership, whether they be the CEO or the owner, they're responsible for the culture below them. It's like the mom or the dad is responsible for their children's attitudes because they are the creators of the container by which allowances like permissions or restrictions are set. So if inside a company there's a lot of bullying, for instance, which I think you had another guest on your show who wrote a book about bullying, right? The Smartest Person in the Room by Krishna Espinosa. Bullying being such a big thing. Again, we're talking about that level of competition between teams, or who's smarter and who's got the answer. If bullying is happening in the company, it's because someone is allowing it to happen. And it's the person at the top. So it's the person at the top's responsibility to put an end to this. And they do this by several different ways. One is, so one of the questions I always ask my entrepreneurs is, and I'm going to give you the answer here, so it's going to be cheating if any of you go for coaching after this and you get asked this question. But here's the question. In your organization, who is the first person you must fire? And the answer is yourself, right? Because if you're showing up tomorrow, like you showed up today, hoping that tomorrow looks different, that's what Einstein called insanity, right? So the first person that needs to get fired is yourself. And so I invite all business leaders, all business owners, all entrepreneurs that are listening to this to really take the invitation to look at themselves and fire themselves. And that means being ready to show up tomorrow completely different. It requires some help. We can't do this on our own. That's why coaching is so powerful. But it means being willing to say, to be responsible, 100% responsible for what's going on around you. and saying, okay, actually, if Bob and Billy are fighting, I've allowed them to fight. So let me go find out what's happening. And here's the other thing, is that most problems that happen in companies are symptoms. And so we need to actually get down to the root cause. When we get to the root cause, the symptoms disappear. And if they don't, then we haven't gone to the real root cause. So I do this work with my clients. I have had wonderful results. One company, for instance, they completely changed the way they interacted internally. And their profits went up 47% in 6 months. Another company I worked with the owner, and then I delivered training to his entire staff over 6 months. And within 18 months, he stepped down as a CEO of that company, of that one company. He split it into 5 companies, named a new CEO as the head of the group, and he essentially retired for a couple of years. He showed up to work like 2 hours a week for like consulting and strategy when they felt they needed him. Now he's working on other projects and building new businesses, and he's taken a more active role in that company again because he wants to, not because he had to. And that's what business owning is, right? Business owning is owning the business. It's not working in the business, but you do have to work in the business for a little while until that culture is set and self-driven. So if anybody here is watching or listening, and you've noticed that there's some interpersonal issues going on within the company, look first at yourself and ask yourself this question: what am I allowing that is creating the environment for this to happen? And what must stop?
And would you be able to kind of tell us who Titan is not for, maybe some misconceptions around what Titan is and what it isn't?
Yeah, so Titan is not for people not willing to take action, right? It is for people, like I said earlier, people who have a position of influence, but it is for people who are willing to look at themselves and make those changes. Because we are 100% responsible for the reality we live in this moment. As long as we're in a habit of blaming or pointing fingers or deflecting, we can't change the reality we're in. So this is not for people who like to blame others, point fingers, deflect responsibility, or for people who are more interested in defending their views than learning new perspectives.
And would you say there's anything that we may have missed that you would like to add? Anything for both leadership and even non-leadership folks who may be wanting to get into leadership?
Yeah, look, anybody can be a leader, right? And leadership is not a rank. So a leader is not someone who has a specific title. Leadership is a responsibility. Leadership, accepting the responsibility of the well-being of those around us. So whether you're a parent or a friend or the janitor or the CEO, there are people around you and you can still be a leader, right? You can still empower others. You can still empathize and move people from a place of pain to a place of power. You can still influence others to greatness, even if you haven't achieved it yourself. So that's what true leadership is. It's not a rank, it's a responsibility. And if you feel like there's something more that's meant for you than what you've had so far, then you are in the perfect position to become a Titan, to really dive deep, find out what your genius is, uncover the 6 intelligences and ignite them for your potential, and create that legacy that fulfills you deep down inside every moment of the day, forever.
As we close out this episode, what 3 pieces of advice would you give to folks to improve their mental state of mind, their mental wellness, and their happiness in their current position, career, no matter if they're a leader or an individual contributor?
The first thing I would say is get a coach. And it could be anybody. It could be me. It could be Brendan. I'm sure Brendan will do some coaching, right? It could be Anybody in your entourage, as long as they're actually coaches. The thing is, Brendan, your podcast is very much like a coaching course, right? Because it's always about listening and learning and new perspectives, right? So it is in its own way a coaching. But the first thing you want to do is you really want to get a coach. And the reason why you want to get a coach is because a jar can't read its own label. So you might be thinking all these years that you're marmalade, only to find out that you're like a super luxurious, rich, double fudge chocolate spread, right? So you will never find that out on your own. It takes help, and that help is best from a coach. Why coaches versus a therapist, for instance? Therapists focus on what's not working and understanding what didn't work. So that's the head. Coaching, we don't so much care about what didn't work. We care more about where are you at right now and where are you moving to the future. So the past acts as arsenal, like a toolbox, not as a weight. And a coach is trained to be unbiased, to listen, a good coach, okay? Because there are coaches out there that are not great. But a good coach is trained to really listen to you and listen to you, the nuances that are not being spoken, the feelings that are being emitted, and to really capture what is essential to you, so that all the dark spots, all the blind spots are lit up, and you can really step into the exponential version of you. Friends and family are great for giving advice, but their advice will always come through the filter of their own unresolved issues. Right? So no matter how much they love you, no matter how great the advice is, it's always through a filter. A coach is not a filter. A coach is really just about you, for your well-being. It's an open, safe space for you to explore everything about you you've ever wanted to know and weren't quite sure how to get there, right? So that's the number one piece of advice. If you can't do coaching, then there's lots of online courses that you can do that are DIY, right, to get started. But absolutely get into the personal development space in some way. The emotional part is probably the part I would address the first, because every decision we make is at its root, it's an emotional decision. Does that count as 3? Get a coach, get into personal development, and if you're getting to personal development, start with the heart. If you only can do one thing, start with the heart. If you can do all the things.
So you opened up a mini can of worms, so we might have to go a bit over time, but I think it will be worth it. So I want to ask 2 more questions before we close out. First thing you touched on, which I want to address, is not all advice is equal, and not all coaches are good coaches. So maybe you have a couple bits of advice on looking for a good coach and any red flags you should look out for.
So most coaches will, if you go to their website, will give you a free gift of sorts. Like I have 2 free gifts on my website, but most will offer you at least 1 free gift. They'll have a blog or something like that, so you can get a taste for them. If it feels like, if it resonates with you, then again, most coaches will offer a strategy call or a discovery call, which is complimentary, where you get to jump on the phone with them. A lot of coaches will have salespeople do this. But you're not working with a salesperson. So I really implore you to talk to the coach who will be coaching you, because coaching is a relationship. In the same way you wouldn't pick out a life partner from a magazine, or you don't want to pick out a coach because they're forced upon you, right? You really want to have a relationship with a coach that feels right to you. And so get on those complimentary calls with the coach themselves. Most coaches have a pattern, a formula by which they go through the strategy call to really understand what it is that you want and what is holding you back. So have those answers ready. Be clear on what is it that you would like from coaching and what's really holding you back, so that strategy call is very effective for you. In my strategy calls, I do that, but I also dive a little deeper, so that even if we don't work together, you've gotten a lot of value from that call and can actually start taking steps forward with yourself. So that would be the number one thing, is to really jump on the call with that coach that you're thinking about. There's a lot of groups on Facebook or LinkedIn that can offer recommendations also. Ask your potential coach about the experience that they have, the results that they've had, their personal philosophies as well. Like I used to work in a coaching organization. I remember one of my fellow coaches had a moral problem with one of her clients' desires, like goals, and she couldn't coach him. Like she had a moral problem with what this with her client wanted to do. Now there was nothing wrong with what the client wanted to do, but sometimes we have these things that's from our own childhood. So investigate as well. Ask your coach some questions as well. Make sure that you feel good with them, that they feel aligned with you and your hopes and your dreams. And the other thing is, not all coaches will have achieved what you want to achieve. Like for instance, not all tennis coaches went to Wimbledon, but they'll still coach a Wimbledon player. So not all coaches will have achieved what you want to achieve. But whatever it is you want work in, so for instance, if you're a CEO who really wants to get the company culture aligned so that everybody in the company is working together, not against each other, then make sure your coach has experience in that.
Yeah, definitely. And then last question, I promise, and we'll let you go. If you could give like one bit of advice to reduce burnout, what would you say?
So the one piece of advice I would say is turn off the screens. Close the laptop. And seriously, it's a hard thing to do because we're used to being connected 24/7 now. But the greatest gift we can give ourselves is time. So block off specific time where no devices are allowed. So I do this on weekends. So Saturday and Sundays, I'm with my kids. I'm not on my computer. I'm not on my phone. I just completely disconnect. And it's beyond just disconnecting because our phones and our computers, they're like a drug. So it does all these things to our hormones inside, like our endorphins and dopamines and all this stuff, right? So it is natural to feel anxious and fidgety. It's basically digital withdrawal, right? So you want to start small, but commit to it. So maybe you start with just 1 hour where everything is turned off and you go for a walk. And then you might do 3 hours and you turn everything off and you might take your favorite person out to a restaurant, right? And just keep making it a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. But plan the substitute activity ahead of time and be excited about it. Make it something that you really want to do. Go hiking, go on a trip, go eat at your favorite restaurant, take up a new sport, go, I don't know, what's really rare but fun. Go do archery. Find the local archery club and go try archery, right? Do something that awakens your spirit because it's not normal to you. It's something new for you. And that helps to break the pattern. But that self-care is super important. And the self-care starts by turning off the tech after you finish this podcast.
So, Gaia, this has been a great conversation. I'm really fascinated by what you're doing, and I'm sure it's helping many. And if anyone has follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Absolutely. So the best way is to go to my website, GaiaFerreira.com. And if you go there now, you can actually take the X2X challenge. So existential to exponential challenge. And it'll give you a glimpse of what the Titan program is all about. But what's really great is that you get your choice of watching, listening, or reading the day's material. And it's the longest day is 5 minutes. So you can do this really quick. You can do it when you're brushing your teeth or when you're driving to work. And each day you're going to get one module, so one glimpse. So day 1 is genius, day 2 is mind, day 3 is heart. And it's food for thought to really get you connected to how that part of you is showing up and what needs changing and what can be changed immediately. And every day there's a worksheet that you can do to integrate the learning, right? Because it's not enough to just hear it, you have to change something instantly. So there's a really good worksheet for each one of those days to really help you to make transformation instantly, to go from existential, so that midlife crisis type of questioning, what am I all about, what am I doing, to exponential, the limitless you. So I invite everybody to do that. And if they do this, and they fill out the work and they want to send me back their worksheets, I am offering, so the complimentary coaching session that I talked about is always available on my website, but what I'm offering extra for people who complete this is a session to really dive a little bit deeper from an NLP, hypnosis, or timeline therapy perspective. So that's You'll hear about it more in the program, but it's very unique strategies to just dive a little bit deeper so you can clear a little bit of space and create that space to learn even more and become exponential. So it's free. It's right there on my website, GaiaFerreira.com. And otherwise, you can email me at GaiaFerreira.com, or you can find me on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Gaia Ferreira or Gaia Ferreira Titans.
Awesome. We'll definitely include all your links in the show notes. So thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today on Cybersecurity Heroes. And to the rest of you, we'll see you next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cybersecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.